Hello everyone, this is Deniz Beser. I'm the founder and the director of Fanzineist Vienna Art Book and Zine Fair. So as you know, Fanzineist Vienna started today, so we are so excited about this, and there are 105 artists and publishers from 35 different countries. And all of that artists and publishers meet at the Fanzineist Vienna Art Book and Zine Fair 2022 online edition. And today our guest is John Yalcinkaya from Sydney, Australia. So John Yalcinkaya is a Turkish-Australian higher education worker, researcher and multidisciplinary artist, and living and working in Sydney, Australia. And he holds a PhD in media, is a senior fellow of the Higher Education Academy, and he works as an academic program manager at Macquarie University International College. John has been in one of the volunteer organizers of Other Worlds, Sydney's largest zine fair. He makes comics, zines, and also he has one of death metal band. It's quite interesting. It will be quite interesting to talk with him about his death metal band too. So I'm gonna invite him right now. I hope I will figure out this connection. Let's see. Going live with him. Hello, John.
Hi.
How are you?
How are you?
It's nice to see you. You just woke up so early time for us. I'm sorry this early waking up situation. I just forgot about that time differences between Australia and
that's
Austria.
Okay, because I actually wake up at 6 a.m. every day anyway. That's schedule.
Perfect. All right. Yeah, it's great.
Yes.
It's great. So yeah, first of all, you're welcome, and it's really nice to see you at Fanzineist Vienna. So would you like to tell a little bit about yourself? So who is John Yalcinkaya? Actually, I just try to tell about you, but of course it's not enough. It's better to hear
Thank you
from
for
you.
the wonderful introduction. Yes. So I am, as you mentioned, I'm an academic living in Sydney. I moved to Sydney from Turkey in 2007. And I've been living here since then. I did a PhD in media studies. Before that, I used to live in Ankara in Turkey. And I guess I can say that I've had an interest in comics and zines since I was very young. And I did actually, when I was living in Turkey, when I was in Ankara, I was part of a collective which published a comics journal, comic studies journal called Serüven, which lasted for 10 issues between 2004 and 2006. And with that collective, we also published a couple of books on comics as well. And I guess for the last about 10 years or so, I started from researching comics. I started going into more making comics and making zines. Actually, I used to make zines when I was a teenager, back in the mid-90s. So my first introduction to zines was more like music zines, especially metal zines that I used to collect. And also with some friends of mine back in high school, we also started making zines ourselves. And actually one of the, later on in the 2000s, with one of my good friends, Utku Usta, we started making, well, he was editing this zine called Sonic Splendor, and I was part of that team as well. I was writing for Sonic Splendor, mostly about films. And I also used to write for some Turkish websites as well, about films, horror films, B-grade films, underground films, and things that are more underappreciated. So I guess in general, I've had an interest in, you know, art and media that's sort of underground, like, you know, films, death metal music, comics and zines and things like that. And I carried this interest with me into academia, and also now for the last 10 years also making comics and zines again myself. So that's shortly me.
Sounds pretty cool. I was just wondering about your comics and how did you start to make comics? I mean, in the beginning, I guess you were just reading some humor magazines like Limon, Leman, or Gırgır from some Turkish satirical humor magazines, right? And then you just started to make your comics, and maybe after that process, you just wanted to make your own independent publications like Zines.
Exactly. Yeah, so I had an interest in humor magazines in Turkey, definitely. Since an early age, I started reading them probably when I was like 8 or 9 years old. And then I actually did a research project on them as well. So my master's thesis was about Lemanyak and Lombak magazines in Turkey, which were monthly periodical magazines.
Great.
And then, yeah, I started making some web comics, and they were very much inspired by that humor comics tradition in Turkey. Very humorous, like very cartoon-like drawings. And the web comics I made was actually about, when I was doing my PhD, it was about like an imaginary zombie infestation on my university's campus. And I was one of the characters, and some of my friends who were also doing PhDs were part of the cast of characters who were fighting against these zombies, which were actually the creation of the vice chancellor of the university. So that was kind of it went on for about a year. I mean, it was very, like, it was made for fun. I had no other kind of goal with that comic, apart from having fun myself. And after I completed my PhD, this was back in 2013. It was around actually towards the end of May 2013. I was like, okay, I've done my PhD now, and now I can kind of relax and not do anything for a while. But a few days later, the Gezi Park protest started, and I found myself really like affected by that. And I was away. I was in Sydney, and I was just kind of watching what's happening through sleepless nights, just trying to follow on social media and, you know, talking to friends. And then after a couple of weeks, I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I have to find a way to contribute to this, these protests. So some friends of mine and I decided to do a comics anthology. So because, I mean, I love comics so much, and I've been like a fan of lots of collective comics anthologies. So I wanted to do like an anthology of comics that was inspired by the Gezi Park protests. And that's how the Dirençizgiroman or Resist Comics project was born. So, which is, I'll show people here. So it was Dirençizgiroman, which was published by Esen Kitap in Turkey. And we also did a crowdfunding campaign to do an English version of it called Comics. So it came out in 2 editions. So some pages there. And this was made by,
yeah, looks great.
like we had a total of, I think, about 30 artists and academics contributing to it in the end. It took us about a year and a half actually to get it done. But that was basically something like a project of passion for us. And I think initially we wanted to do something a bit more quickly, but it turned out to take us longer. But it became, I guess, a good archive of, you know, what was happening in Gezi protests. Yeah.
Yeah, as you said, I mean, the Gezi protest was giving so much inspirations to the people, to the artists and musicians, and everybody were producing more or less some works which were related about Gezi. And after that period, when we look at that times, we just see some unique humor and resistance, and quite logical and powerful resistance against Erdogan and that political system. So it was really great times, actually. I think this is what we need for this world, some resistance. And also, you just want to create a resistance with zines. This is quite interesting as a topic. So I actually want to go back a bit, like your Ankara times again. In that period, when you started to make your first zines, how was that zine scene in Ankara? You were just meeting with other zinesters, and how was your connection with Istanbul and with other cities in Turkey about that zine scene? You were just sending some zines each other, or how was that scene in that period? Can you tell us a bit?
So in the 90s, I was living in Antalya at that time, and so when I went to Ankara to do my bachelor's degree, so in Antalya we started making zines, and we were like swapping zines or buying zines from like underground distros, which were also doing tape trades at the time, selling like underground metal demo tapes and zines. So that was a very lively, I think, scene at the time, and I was swapping zines with people like pen pals in Ankara and also Istanbul. There were like some really good metal zines, definitely, and some also literary zines. I was also interested in like literature and getting like swapping literary zines from the time. I think it was very lively. Like lots of people were making zines in the 90s, of course, and I mean, zines never stopped, but like maybe it's starting to become again a bit of a more lively scene as well, as far as I can see in Turkey. Yeah, and then when I moved to Ankara, I became part of different like groups. So I met Levent Cantek, who used to be the publisher of a very famous comic zine called Koloni in Ankara. Back in the 1990s, they published about 9 issues, and it was focusing on comics culture. And I met some members of the Çizgiroman Comics group as well, and they still publish their zines, although some of them even became artists for DC or Marvel Comics in the US, but they haven't lost that zine spirit, and they continue to make zines. So Ankara, and also I mean, I'm not sure how much you can call that a zine, but it was kind of self-published in a way, called Gece Yarısı Sineması, which was a film magazine / zine. And you know, I met the publishers or editors of Gece Yarısı Sineması, Kaya Özkaracalar, Sadi Konuralp, Orgun Yakın. So and I think in Ankara there was a very strong sort of culture of especially these underground film fans and comics fans, which maybe did not exist in Istanbul to that extent at the time, or there weren't like publications like those coming out from Istanbul maybe. But I think in Ankara there was a lot of interest in that stuff. Yeah, so I think the times I lived in Ankara, it was a very lively environment. We also were part of mailing lists, which really helped in the kind of earlier days of the internet, in a way. Like in the late 90s, early 2000s, a lot of these like works were being organized through mailing lists, like Yahoo groups and things like that. And we were kind of in touch with each other across different cities, and we were organizing to, you know, put together publications like books or magazines and things like that. Yeah, so it was very good.
Yeah, sounds pretty interesting. I would like to see that period, especially 90s of Turkey, and there was there were really great zines like Mondo Trasho, Lanet, and some punk zines that I really like. So yeah, sounds quite interesting. So would you like to tell about some of the fanzines you have produced before? I mean, as I see, you just made recently some new zines, which was a bit sarcastic and humor zines. Let's say there was one of ET zines, but that ET got localized in Turkey, so
I mean, actually, that's not.
it has a quite interesting story. I would like to hear from you too.
Well, that's it here. So Homoti. Well, this is actually not humorous at all. This is not a non-fiction zine. So this is about Homoti, which is actually a remake of E.T. that was made by Turkish director Müjdat Gezen, actor and director. So made in 1987, and it was, I think, shot on a low budget with a Betamax video. And the thing about the Homoti was it was kind of a parody of E.T. It was a comedy film. And they decided to turn E.T. into a gay, like, alien. Or, I mean, in the zine, I talk about it a bit more because it's kind of, Homoti himself is making a point that, you know, these kind of constructs are imaginary, you know, like love is love. Basically, his message is love is love. But Homoti falls in love with the main character, who's a journalist. And then it's like an unrequited love. The guy doesn't love him back. So it's kind of becomes a tragic story in the end. Yeah, but I thought it was an interesting example in Turkish cinema at the time. As I mentioned, like I have a big interest in underground and low budget and B-grade movies. So I was quite surprised to hear about this film, which was actually written about in Öteki Sinema, which is like another website that I write for. And anyway, so when I heard about Homoti, I was like, oh my God, this is like such an interesting film, and I should like research it a bit more. And I ended up making a comic about it, which was kind of like an academic comic that also talks about some theories like queer theory, or like there's like a monster theory in it, and also going into like the history of queer cinema in Turkey, like how gay, lesbian, trans people were represented in Turkish cinema, because actually in the 80s, like there weren't that many films. Like this was one of, I think, 3 films that kind of featured gay characters in it. And it was an interesting example because it was like a remake of E.T., like there's an alien in it, and etc., which is another kind of interesting thing because, yeah, so it's like showing gay characters as like an alien, monstrous other. So that was something also I wanted to look at in this comic.
Yeah, sounds quite interesting. As I remember, there was many creepy scenes of that movie.
Yeah.
Because it was quite cheap and low budget production, as you said before. And for me, it seemed quite more or less comedy. I mean, I just remember that puppet character and that green puppet character like an E.T., but it seems like a bit fucked up. But it seems also funny too. So yeah, it was quite interesting movie as a B movie, let's say.
I think
it's like a bit underground.
It's become a cult film now. I think like it's available on YouTube. People can watch it on YouTube, and I think I even saw some people made a podcast about it. Like they're based in the US, and they made a podcast like 2 hours talking about Homoti, and they even like found my comic and they mentioned my comic in their podcast as well. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah,
there is many cult movies from 70s of Turkey, like The Man Who
Exactly.
Saved the World by Cüneyt Arkın, and yeah, most of people likes that kind of B movies. Also, I really love that one too.
Yeah.
B movies are great. It's better than all kind of high budget movies.
They have more
for me.
imagination than a lot of movies, I think.
Yeah, you're right. Also, I wonder your story about Australia. How did you move from Turkey to Australia? How did you make this decision by yourself?
Well, it wasn't by myself. It was with my family, actually. So my mother and my brother moved here when actually I was like in my 20s. And then after a while, I was like still in Ankara. They lived here for a few years. I was still living in Ankara. You know, I was working there, doing my master's. But after I finished my master's degree, I was like, okay, maybe I should, you know, try and live overseas, live abroad for a bit. So I moved here, and then I was thinking, yes, when I go there, I will do a PhD. So I started looking into PhD options here and got into a PhD program. And I was thinking, oh, I'll just do a PhD there and I'll go back to Turkey, because I actually quite liked living in Ankara. I had a good sort of friendship circle, and, you know, I was part of all these groups and, you know, publishing stuff and things like that. But then I ended up, you know, starting a family. I, you know, I've got my partner who I've been with for 13, 14 years now. And yeah, so we have kids. So it's just basically settled here.
Yeah, sounds pretty cool. But of course, I guess you miss Turkey sometimes, or you just miss the old times of Turkey, let's say, not these days.
That's the thing. Like, it's hard to figure out whether you're actually missing the place or missing a time. And I think it's a combination of both. Like, you miss a place at a particular time, which for me was, I guess, like when I left it. Yeah, so when I rarely go back these days, actually, to Turkey. I was in Turkey recently, like last month, which was after 7 years of not going there. I basically just visited my family for a bit and then came back.
Also, recently, you have been in Germany for Documenta, right? So you were just part of one of project. Would you like to tell about that project in Kassel, Documenta?
So I went to Documenta with my bandmate Safdar Ahmet, who's so he's also the director of a collective here called the Refugee Art Project, and he's also a comics maker, zine maker, and a fan of death metal. So that's how actually we met, through the zine scene, because he was with Refugee Art Project. He was producing these zines, which I'll show as well here. I brought a pile of zines and books with me to show people in this. So this is some of they make, an excellent example of sort of activist zines. So what they did was they were visiting refugees, asylum seekers in detention centers in Australia, because Australia has a very kind of cruel border policy where they put people in detention indefinitely, and people like refugees, asylum seekers don't know when they will come out of detention. So Refugee Art Project, and they were visiting and doing art workshops with them and publishing these like little zines, like with art and writing in them. So in Documenta 15, basically Safdar and Refugee Art Project were invited to produce a work, and so Safdar wanted to combine all the work that he's been doing. So the work with Refugee Art Project, our band Hazine, and his comics work, and a film as well, a film installation. So it was all kind of a combined project. So what we did was, with our band, So we are called Zine. We're an anti-racist Muslim death metal band, and we formed in 2015. And what we wanted to do with the band was there's been an ongoing kind of racist and Islamophobic tendency in Australia as well as in the rest of the Western world as well. And the refugee policy actually here is kind of an extension of that Islamophobic and racist tendencies, because often the refugees who are being kind of kept in detention are also coming from Muslim countries. And the politicians here and the media here actually has a very open, overt way of showing their kind of racism towards Muslim minorities or Muslim migrants and refugees. So the band was born out of that frustration, basically, to combat this kind of racist and Islamophobic discourse in politics and media. So in Documentary 15, basically, we produced a record. So this was the record. It's called Sovereign Murders.
That's
the vinyl,
vinyl, right? It's limited edition vinyl.
Only 1,000 copies. So this came out of a Berlin-based label called Piranha Records. And part of the work is we worked with an Iranian Kurdish refugee, our friend Kazem Kazemi. So that's that's part of the refugee art project work as well. So Kazem is a refugee who was kept in detention offshore on Manus Island by the Australian regime for nearly 6 years. And then he was also in detention onshore here in Australia for 2 years as well. And he's a metal guitarist. He loves heavy metal. So we wanted to collaborate with him on this record. He came to Sydney and last year, and we recorded together. So we recorded about 9 songs. And then that process was also documented on film by Safdar and our filmmaker friend Alia Aden. So Alia and Safdar made a film installation which was included in Documentary 15. And we also made a zine called Alien Citizen, which was also became the part. It's in the album, in the vinyl record, but also it was being distributed in Documentary 15. So that's the zine, Alien Citizen. This is a different version of that zine. So it's featuring refugees.
It's a Rezo, right? It looks like a Rezo. Is it a Rezo?
This is a Rezo version, but there's also like a normal print, digital print version as well. Yeah.
I got it.
So, and I think this zine was like the highest circulation zine that I ever contributed to, because they Documentary 15 published a few thousand copies of these, I think, being handed out to just visitors to Documentary 15 in Kassel. So that was like a good project to be part of, and I was able to visit the festival in June, which was fascinating. It's like all about, I think, and it shows that there's a growing interest in like zines and collectives and like the kinds of works that we do in the art world. So the artistic directors are an Indonesian collective called Ruang Rupa, and they all just invited collectives from all around the world and showing like the spirit of, you know, coexistence, collectivities. And there's lots of like zines and kind of underground music or publications and archives that show works like ours. So I think that shows that zines and publications, alternative publications, are becoming more part of arts, you know, contemporary or mainstream arts as well now.
I was actually thinking about this topic, I just wanted to ask you, in contemporary art scene, day by day, we are just gonna see more examples about zines in the galleries or biennials. So yeah, day by day, artists and collectives are producing more publication-based artworks or artist books or art books or zines. So it seems quite interesting, and also I'm so happy to see that kind of examples. So yeah, I hope this movements will be growing up about zines and other kind of independent publications, because we are just gonna feel free about what we do.
Exactly.
So I think this is what we like about underground publications, some indie publications, or artist books. So they are just limited. They have some low budget. So yeah, it just brings some honest atmosphere on the paper somehow.
Yeah,
with this way.
I mean, I've been following your work as well. I know you've been showing your work, your zines, your artist books in different kinds of exhibitions. And I think, yeah, like you said, it's becoming more and more accepted in the art world, or in mainstream culture in general, let's say. And here as well, for example, one of the biggest contemporary art spaces, there's the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney. They've been running like a zine fair for many years now. Like every year they do a zine fair. And also there's like lots of state libraries, national libraries, or local libraries that have now zine collections where people can visit and look at the zines. So these are important archiving, I guess, efforts. Because there's actually one purpose zines serve for me is like keeping, it's like an alternative history writing format, because not every collective or group or political movement are actually written about or covered in mainstream sources or mainstream media, but these groups sometimes write their own histories or like keep a record of their own movements in zines or artist books. And it's really important to like keep and archive these publications and you know, make them reach a broader audience, because they become part of that unwritten history, which needs to be, you know, people should know about these things. So I quite appreciate the efforts of, you know, art galleries or exhibitions or curators and librarians who are actually caring about like these works that we do and keeping them, you know, for future generations.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I agree with you. If nobody writes our history, we can just write by ourselves. I mean, it's up to us. So we don't need to believe mainstream medias, so we can just create our micro medias. Okay, maybe it's not give so much big effects, but still it can create some minor effects in the scene. So it's quite important to create that kind of indie and underground publications.
Yeah,
that's
and with like Resist Comics, that's exactly what we thought, because mainstream media in Turkey wasn't writing or like broadcasting about the Gezi Park protests. So we were like, okay, we'll make a comics anthology, because I mean, comics is our medium, basically. My friends and I, we were like, that's the medium we know most. So we want to make comics, like we want to use this medium to talk about what's happening. And that sort of became an archive in itself. It's like a, you know, a history maybe that wasn't being written in mainstream media. And it becomes like a time capsule in a way that documents a movement. So I thought that was like an important thing to do.
What do you think about the future of the zines? So in the future, there will be maybe some hard times for the zinesters, because day by day, people are just gonna be the crazy about social media, and about the internet. So that's why our readings are just gonna be less than before. I mean, people, in my opinion, read less books nowadays because of using internet so much. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to say. I was part of another like a online panel recently, and that we were talking about whether we can see these like online media as a form of zine making. Like, can you see like Instagram reels or TikTok videos? Like, can they be used by zine makers as an alternative zine media? And I was thinking, well, no, because these are not zines. Zines are a particular thing. They're like often print-based publications for me. I mean, there's also the concept of the web zine, which is also like an acceptable format. But even when people were like making web zines quite heavily in the early 2000s, there was still room for like the print-based photocopied zine publications or other kind of printing formats. So I think, I feel, maybe I'm just being optimistic, but there will always be room for like these print zines. Maybe I'm just being old and nostalgic about it. I just love the print zine format. And I hope that, people will continue, because I look at, as you mentioned in the beginning, we organize zine fairs here in Sydney, and I look around in zine fairs and I see young people, and there's some teenagers, there's, people who are maybe in their early 20s, they like making zines, and they show a bunch of zines that they make, and, they swap these zines. So I feel like there's still a younger generation, despite all the distractions of social media and TikTok and Instagram, etc. They still like want to produce something in this time, because I think once you get the zine virus, you can't like get rid of it from your system. As you can see from people like me who keep making zines in the 40s and 50s, etc. So I'm hopeful.
Yeah, you are right. I mean, we were just starting from the basic level about this zine, and day by day, year by year, that virus was just growing up inside of us. So because of that reason, also you were just gonna be one of the volunteer or organizer of Other Worlds, the Sydney's largest Zine festival. So this is the level of that virus somehow. Zine virus.
Zine virus is strong. And you don't isolate. That's the good thing about the zine virus. It's all about mingling together. You don't have to isolate.
Yeah, I prefer zine virus than coronavirus. I mean, this is the best virus.
Yeah.
Anyway, I actually wonder about Australian zine scene, but actually you were just telling a bit to us. So do you make some connection from Turkey about zine swapping, or with some other countries like that old school days? Do you make some sending letters about your zines?
Sometimes people get in touch, or I hear from other people swapping my zines with others. I haven't actually been doing a lot of swapping outside of Australia, but here, like the zine fairs, like there's a huge zine and comics community here in Australia, and there's a lot of swapping happening here in person. So that has been my main kind of swapping kind of time, is when I go to zine fairs, and then I like people walk around and, hey, do you want to swap this zine or comic with me? And that's how it's been working for me. I don't have, yeah, I don't know. I guess the times have changed in a way, so I don't have as many pen pals as I used to have back in the 90s. So it's more like emailing or, you know. But I send like comics and zines to all around the world when people like ask. I'm happy to send them a copy.
Yeah, actually, I do the same like you. When I go to some zine festival or art book fair, I just bring my own zines, and at the end of that fair, I just make some zine swapping. Yeah, this is what I like about the zine festivals, and it's really great. You can just make that exchange about your publications. And do you keep your old zines in your archive? For example, do you have your first zines in your personal archive?
My own zines, you mean, or any zines?
Your own and
Yeah.
any zines, let's say.
I do actually. I never throw anything out. That's my that's my problem. So I have big piles of things everywhere, boxes and boxes of zines and cassettes and CDs and books, comics. So yeah, I keep them, and I sometimes go back and open and have a look. So I do have some zines that I've had since the 90s, which are kind of now yellowing paper, you know, because they've been around for 20 years or something. Yeah, but it's good to keep.
I guess you are keeping your old humor magazines too, like me.
Definitely. I have them since the early 90s, basically, since I started buying humor magazines. I kept them. If they haven't been chucked out by someone else, I still have them.
Yeah, sounds pretty cool. Yeah, I have many of them in Istanbul. There is many humor magazines and zines, but the problem is when I move to somewhere else, also I shouldn't lose them. Otherwise, it's a problem.
That's my mom keeps them for me. So it's like all in you know, in her house. They're in boxes. So when I visit her, I go and look.
It's great.
Oh, that's so like.
You are lucky.
Yeah.
My mom would just throw away them. She did before. So you are lucky because of that reason.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you have some future plans about your zines and your music projects? And
I'm always I always have several projects brewing, I guess. I'm working on more comics. I also do some, like I mentioned with the Homoti comic, I also make sort of comics that are a bit more academic. So the kind of research-based comics where I do, and you know, as if you would do like write an academic article, I go and do a research, but rather than writing an article, I make a comic about the research. So I'm working on a couple of research articles that are kind of comics as well. Yeah, and I've got with our band, we will be releasing some music videos soon from the first album. Hopefully we'll be playing some shows maybe in the next couple of months in Australia. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
That sounds cool. Do you often give concerts with your band?
Not often. I mean, the band is like, it's become more of a like an art project in a way. So our performances are often unique. It's not like a concert, just a concert, but there's also some kind of performance art happening in the concerts as well. So one example, for example, was in the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney. we collaborated with an Indonesian artist called Jumadi, who makes shadow puppets. So as we were playing, he was doing like shadow puppets in the background over us. So that was one. Another performance we did in another art space here called Cement Fondue, and we did like a cake eating performance where we made like a white racist man cake. So the cake was, like the head of a white guy who was supposed to be racist. So we invited the audience to eat the white racist guy with us. It's kind of a zombie eating performance. Yeah.
It's a good idea.
That way we kind of destroyed white racism in the form of a cake. Yeah. So our performance like that
Sounds
usually, and we don't often perform very often, but hopefully now we will perform a bit more after the record came out.
Is there several video records on YouTube or some other platforms like Vimeo?
Yeah, there's some YouTube
about
videos.
This project band?
There's some YouTube videos of the band, and you can see part of our cake eating stuff as well on the videos. Yeah. So the people can search Zine and they can find us probably on YouTube.
Yeah, that's great. I think you shared several videos before on your Instagram account. This is what I remember about your band project. Yeah, and you had makeup, right? There was a great makeup on your face.
So it's like the black metal tradition of putting on corpse paint, but it's like an interpretation of that in a way, becoming like the Muslim zombies. That bench on racism.
Yeah, I really like the idea of your band. Cool. So I'm just checking out my notes. So is there any questions? More? Yeah, I actually asked all of them. So would you like to add something else before closing this live broadcast?
I want to say thank you very much to you and Fanzineist Vienna. It's such a wonderful organization, and I actually saw it for the first time last year, I think, and I thought, I should put my expression of interest to be part of it, but I think I was too busy at the time. So I'm finally very happy to be part of it this year, and it's like an amazing effort. So thank you and congratulations for putting it together. And thank you for having me for this chat. Like, it's been a wonderful chat. And good to finally.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's really nice to see you at Fanzineist and at Instagram Live. So it was really nice conversation. I mean, I would like to have a more conversation with you in the future in our own language, in Turkish. So it's gonna be easier for me. Anyway, thank you very much, John.
Thanks
for your giving time. Have a nice morning.
Bye. Ciao.
Ciao. See you then. Bye.